Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for July 22nd, 2024. Tonight we have two items, and it looks like we're starting with our first one, which is a financial update and budget assumptions as we move forward. And then we have the recreation business plan. Before we get started, I do want to make one public service announcement, and that is about if you want to have donuts with cops, tomorrow is the day to do it. So join us, please, out in front of the APD for cops, donuts, and good times with your community. All right, let's get right into 10 o'clock? 8 to 10 now. Thank you. 8 to 10 a.m. We'll see you there. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pete Strucker, Finance Director, joined by Matt Grau, our Budget Manager, and Courtney DeVito, HR Director. We are here to tag team the first item for tonight, and I'm going to kick it off. If Matt can share his screen.
Tag team, huh? That wasn't
Tag team.
That wasn't a Hulk Hogan reference, was it? By any chance?
I don't want to make any comments there.
That's to share it. There we go. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
We've never seen any of those.
All right. You good?
I can make it larger. There you go.
There we are. Next slide. So, tonight we're going to be having a quick economic update from myself. I'll turn it over to Matt to talk through some of the budget assumptions and kind of do that in addition with Courtney. And there'll be some comments at the end about a little bit of housing initiatives that we're looking at as well. So I really like this initial cartoon. It really kind of captures the competing issues and kind of the stress around managing an economy at the national level, the state level. And it's just quite humorous to kind of think about how delicate you really have to be to kind of keep things afloat and without pushing too far. I do note that one thing that's really missing in that kind of graphic is the fact that politics also play into that balance. And that's something I'll touch on a little bit later in this conversation. So jumping into kind of the local economy, through the ski season, we've actually seen about 6% growth in our sales tax, which is actually quite good. Basically, the trend has been that most communities are kind of flat or even a little bit down based on a recent listserv kind of survey that went out. So we're actually in good shape right now. It's positive news. Obviously, there is a caveat to that 6% that if you really factor in inflation, you're really kind of looking a little bit more like 3 to 4% in growth. So there's a little bit of an anomaly there, but overall still positive. If you really take a look at those starred items, those top 5 largest sectors of our economy are really driving 75% of our total revenue. And the top 2 really drive at least almost 50% of our total revenue. So we still have these anchor institutions that are really providing the most for the resources in this particular area. And just to point out, our economy is mostly local. I think a lot of times we get pushback that there's a lot of online sales that are kind of diminishing some of the local consumption and support for our community. It's roughly about 75% coming kind of from local generation. And in a lot of months, we're actually closer to 90%. So it's still good news that we have a lot of local economic activity kind of happening. Next. So on the taxable sales side and on tax, essentially we had that 6% growth for the first big section of our calendar year and fiscal year, that being the inclusion of all the ski season months. You know, with that, we still have some headwinds ahead of us, and so for the next half of the year, we're really anticipating a little bit of softness coming in, and that's going to likely result in, you know, a 3% growth for the year. That is, I would say, a conservative approach, and I'm kind of hoping to beat that expectation, but still positive overall. And like I said, a lot of the other communities that I heard from are actually already flat or down at this point. In terms of the budget figures, that's really still adding about $400,000 in revenue over the budgeted estimates that we put out at the beginning of the year. So in terms of dollars, that's still really a good message. And again, in terms of tax, it's important to note for the folks that have maybe not tuned into this in the past, that these sales tax dollars are still dedicated resources for our programs. It can't be used for anything. It's based on voter approvals. And so the largest recipient of these dollars is the Parks and Open Space Fund, as you can see in the pie chart, with some other resources going to other efforts as well. Right now, we're anticipating about, like I said, a 3% growth on 2024 over 2023. And right now, we've pegged only a 2% escalation for 2025. We'll continue to update these numbers as additional tax data comes in. But in terms of planning purposes, we're kind of keeping things a little bit soft and hopefully see the upside. Shifting into a different taxing stream, our first full 12 months of the short-term excise tax, short-term rental excise tax has been realized. This was a new source that started in May of 2023. And after the first 12 months, we basically collected $6.8 million. Based on that voter authorization, again, the majority of this goes to the housing program. That's about 4.8 million of the 6.8 million went that way. The remaining two efforts for capital infrastructure and environmental initiatives received the remaining roughly 2 million. In terms of short-term rental activity, we really saw that both the owner-occupied and the lodge-exempt properties were relatively flat, even with the inclusion of the new taxing structure. But we did see about a 10% drop in the investment-type properties. And the rationale for that reduction basically is that we saw a small drop in the amount of permits. So we had some people actually give up their permits once the tax went into place. But the larger impact was due to the fact that the long-term rental activity in those properties actually went up significantly. So the use of the properties actually changed.
Question, Pete.
Yeah.
4% drop in total permanent properties. Do you have a breakdown on where those losses were? And we had targeted a decrease in each of the sectors, I believe, is how we're doing on that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely varied, and I'd have to go back to grab the data for you, and if I can share that with you as a follow-up item for sure. Yeah.
I just want to say that last statement feels really good, learning that some of these short-term rental properties are being rented out long-term.
My question in that would be, when you say long-term, do you have any discernment around over 30 days versus year-round?
I don't. I mean, we have folks file on a monthly basis, so it could be for that singular month that they did a full 30 days and therefore are exempt from the taxation process. It could be that they had a 3-month. It could be that this was a year-long agreement. We don't mandate that they give us details around specific rentals as part of their tax filing. It would only be if we get into an audit situation that we would really ask for that level of detail.
Thanks.
Is that something that we would want to see? Is a breakdown of like how long is the term and what are the rates to assess if we're really making any gain on housing our locals?
So to answer your question, I think it's going to have to be a little bit of a discussion with the STR community in terms of what they're willing to share. Again, I don't know that they're obligated to give us that information under our current programs and regulations. So it would be a bit more of a voluntary basis unless we are, again, in an audit situation. I know that the state is even pushing back and potentially pushing forward legislation to actually limit the amount of items you can ask for in this regard.
I'm not really not interested, but I have no excitement around it because I really don't think that we've impacted long-term residential for locals. Are there perhaps more folks that are coming here and renting longer term? I do think that's probably happening. But regardless, if, just taking a look through the paper, talking to anybody who's doing rentals, the long-term rental rates that are being charged are still, even if they are serving locals, they are serving a very small niche of locals. So I actually am less interested in looking at that as an impact here, as I was about talking to council about reviewing the STR permit program, and making sure that it's being effective in other areas. I just don't think we're getting those long-term local rentals in that sense. Definitely not in the affordable category, I think. But I am interested about, what we're seeing in the lodging district and really those lodging exempt type properties. I think I've had a few conversations with owners of condominiums, not single-family homes, but condominiums that were interested in where the permit process was. So I, for one, am interested in learning more. This has been 1 year. Are we 1 year?
Yep, since May of '23.
So I don't need to jump to this now, but I think as we start getting more information, I think that this council or a future council should revisit the STR permits to make sure that perhaps our quotas, our caps are in the right place.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments here?
Similar. So the intent of this slide is just to basically relay that the STR experience that we've been talking about isn't necessarily indicative of the overall lodging community. Obviously, we have the traditional lodges as well to kind of overlay into the offerings for the tourist base. Essentially, there's some inconsistent data across the different lodging types and also just the different drivers of overall revenue collections. You can see that some indicators are actually up and some other ones are down. But overall, taxable sales are up 4% as an aggregate on the lodging community. It is important to note that a lot of this data is being provided, at least in part, by the Destametrics information that gets published. That does provide us some great information around trends, but it isn't necessarily a stopgap for a full assumption of the overall economy. Destametrics data is actually a snippet of the overall number of beds in the community, so it doesn't tell the full picture all the time.
On your slide there, did I miss you talking about, you have it demarcated as occupancy down 7%, but then as I look over at the chart, are those the numbers that we're using, 69 and 64, or is there some other?
Correct. So those averages right now are basically off the Destametrics information that's coming out, and that's by month. So the occupancy levels by month. As you would expect in April, we have a lot of limited use of the beds overall because the ski season wraps up. So we're seeing a drop of about, not 7 percentage points, but actually 7% between the two numbers.
The two numbers that are at the bottom, the average?
They are the average for those 4 months.
Okay, because my math says 5%. I'm just trying to make sure, why am I missing 2% here? What?
If you took 7% of 69, you'll get to 64.
Thank you.
If you just do straight
Thank you.
subtraction, you'll
Thank you.
get 62.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of actual tax collections in dollars, this is again is similar to that of the city sales tax where there's dedicated uses for the funds. So obviously we're talking about two different taxing streams, the new excise tax, which is basically got a 70-30 split, 70% going to affordable housing and 30% going to those other two initiatives of capital maintenance and environmental initiatives. And then the traditional lodging tax, which has always been in place and is basically 2% that is getting spread 75% to tourism and 25% to transit. We're anticipating right now that, we'll see about $12 to $13 million a year in the next, this year and next year in total taxation. So last tax that I wanted to briefly touch on was the real estate transfer tax. Just to be clear, I think that when we initially set up the budget expectations for 2024, we thought the real estate market would still be a little bit subdued. A lot of volume still isn't there in the inventory side, but we've been seeing that real estate sales are fairly resilient right now. The overall cost per transaction or average transaction cost is actually down a bit, but volume is up. So we're actually still seeing decent collections, and I anticipate that we're going to increase our forecasts for both this year and then next year by a few $1 million a year. So right now we've got about almost $6.5 million in the door after 5 months. I'm anticipating somewhere around $14 million for the housing fund and about another $7 million for the arts fund for the year. So that's really good news basically in those program areas because we've always been kind of a bit cautious in terms of what our expectations are for this year. And I think we're seeing that there's a bit more resiliency than what we anticipated, and that will support those programs for the community. And lastly, I did want to give the council an update on our investments. We've been seeing some really good returns still for the community, if you want to call this quote unquote free money because of not having to generate it elsewhere. We have a little under 400 million kind of across all of our funds in reserve, which is extremely healthy, although it is a little bit compartmentalized into different funds that have specific uses again. But overall, we've generated a little under 6 million after just 5 months in the investment pool. I think that, for the year, we're going to anticipate somewhere around 10 to 12 million. So that's some really healthy returns. It's about 4% across all of our investments on average. I would say money we're putting into the market these days, we're pushing it in the long term, so usually between the 3 and 5 year arrangement every time, and we're still making around 4.5 on those new investments. So that's good news and a lot different than what we were experiencing just a few years ago when the investment environment was pretty horrid given the federal funds rate. So we do anticipate that the feds will probably be taking action likely in September and start bringing rates down. That will start having an impact on future investment opportunities. So we are trying to continually push money in, but we do it on a laddered basis. We always have investments rolling off periodically and pushing those back in.
Question for council. $375 million invested. Should we be using that for infrastructure? We should be actually putting that to use. That's 2.5 years of operating expense.
So yeah, you have a little bit of a nuance, right? You have to identify where the funds are sitting. So we have over 50 million sitting in the Wheeler Fund, or the Arts and Culture Fund, excuse me. We have a decent amount of money that we want to have in reserve on the utility side, and we have a target in there of 25% of annual spend. The general fund also has a 25% of annual spend kind of requirement in our financial policies. So it does depend on where the money resides. Also, you have some big projects, most notably the lumberyard. The Affordable Housing Fund right now has almost 100 million, and that is earmarked for the next project. So
And
there's
that's
a reason why
included
we
in
have
this
some big numbers.
375?
Correct. Correct. So that's why we do have that significant balance in some regards.
Thanks.
Would you like any more information about that? You know, we've got budget season starting up. We're going to be cranking on that. Would you like to have that as some part of the conversation?
Yeah, I'd like to figure out what other communities have as reserves, and I know that we'll be using that 150 fund, but to see if we could be using some of these reserves to do some of this infrastructure stuff that we've decided is a priority.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the conversation would start with the information. What funds are sitting at why, and why are they there, right? So there may or may not be opportunity for some moves there. I wouldn't have any ability to weigh in on that now without kind of knowing which funds are doing what and stuff. So I'm really only suggesting it as part of our conversation as we go into budget with an awareness by our team, so.
And quite honestly, we can do that as one of our opening items in budget kickoff.
Most of these funds have designated purposes already. They're just not at a place where the project's being executed at this time. And we'll go over that again with you, the LRP, the long-range plans for each fund as well as the capital programming out of them. But I just want to caution that these are dollars that have very specific purposes they've been saved up for, like child care centers, housing, things of that nature.
Right.
Yeah, it's good to have that context.
Thanks.
So with that, I am going to turn the mic over to Matt, and he'll talk through some of the budget information and hand off to Courtney from there.
Thank you, Pete. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and I will be talking a little bit about Consumer Price Index, some construction metrics, and then some budget assumptions that we are proposing for 2025. And Pete picked out the clip art.
In it to win it.
All right, so CPI, obviously inflation went up, CPI went up through COVID. I think that's, I have another chart that has more historical, but basically going into COVID, CPI skyrocketed, has slowly come back down since that peak in mid-2022, sitting about 3.5% now. Looking more specifically at core CPI in the bar chart, that excludes energy and food, so that green bar, core CPI is sitting 3.6%, but call it 3.5%. So that's something that we've been monitoring and that we use to kind of project out for future years. Similar chart, you get a little more historical data in the top one. The gray bar is COVID again, but following the similar path with the mid-2022 peak. Slowly, the U.S. has kind of stabilized. That's the kind of light khaki color. Our closest metro market, Denver, continues to actually decrease. They haven't flattened yet, but as we all know, Aspen and the Roaring Fork Valley doesn't always necessarily mirror our closest metro market. So I would say, for comparison purposes, we're probably closer to the U.S. market in this case than Denver Metro. We do expect that trend to continue as we go into 2025. So it'll come from those mid-threes, lowering down closer to about a 3%. And so with that, we're proposing a 3% increase on base goods and services for 2025. Any questions there?
Just for context, then, remember you won't see that 3% in supplementals then. That will be built into the budget of nearly every service we provide for goods and services. We would just make that assumption that that is appropriate for keeping up with inflation at current service levels. Supplementals are when the need is greater than that. Just a friendly reminder on how the process works.
All right, and then on the capital side, similar to CPI, capital construction cost index is a metric that the construction industry looks at. Again, the biggest gray bar kind of in the middle there was the housing crisis in 2008. COVID is the skinnier bar off to the right, but there was a kind of inflationary growth in the construction industry over a long period of time until COVID hit. It has skyrocketed. As we all went through that, there were material shortages, wood, metal. At different times, those individual commodity prices skyrocketed. But we have not seen that come back down the same way we've seen CPI and inflation come back down. Essentially, a new baseline has been set in the construction industry. Just to highlight on some of the skilled labor costs that we've seen since that COVID period in February 2020, and this is through April of 24, but basically a 25 to 50% and sometimes even more increase in the cost of skilled labor. And I apologize, it's a little hard to read all of this, but essentially materials as well have seen that 25 to 50% cost since 2020. They're not coming back down. A new baseline has been set for construction materials and labor. So given that, as we entered into the 2025 capital planning process, I really, with Pete, tasked Tyler Kristoff in his role and department heads and project managers to really dig deep into their existing 5-year capital plan, reprioritize, reset kind of their costing. If they had previous estimates that had been placeholders for 2, 3, 4 years, we needed to rebase those with higher costs. So you'll see that when we bring our capital plan forward this year to talk about 2025 capital. The dollar amounts will probably be in line with what we did last year, but maybe the number of projects will be smaller because of those cost increase, because of the need for larger contingencies for the unknowns. You have already seen it in contracts that you've approved when we've gone out for RFP and, we get 10 responses and they're all higher than what we budgeted. So we're really trying to reset our capital plan to build in those cost escalations. So we will be talking more about that as we come to the work sessions this fall. So I think this is really just more informative of what we've all seen. So, any questions on CPI, that kind of inflationary growth proposed, or capital?
Yeah, how can you bring all this down?
If I had a magic wand.
Thank you.
There was one more on the labor piece, I apologize. But basically you can see the growth numbers as we talked about, again, 25 to 50% or even higher for some.
Yeah, I think this was just
Oh, this is the city's.
city's own experience
true
relative
cost, that's
to
right.
some of those national trends.
Yep, so again, our costs are very much in line with national trends with this.
I'm ready, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Tory and council members. Courtney DeVito, HR Director, and this afternoon I'm going to talk a little bit about total compensation as we look towards 2025. So on this first slide here, you can see that we have some information about what our total compensation philosophy is, and this has been in place since 2022. And total compensation is overall what really allows us to keep pace with the market and to help us recruit and retain the staff that do everything for us here. And it's not just a number on your paycheck. It encompasses pay, it encompasses your benefits, your growth opportunities within the organization, and culture as well. And so I have a few other pieces of what total compensation looks like to talk about this evening. So health insurance, obviously something that's pretty important to discuss a little bit. And health insurance costs in our area continue to increase. But we also see an increase in utilization amongst our staff as well. So we're continually monitoring what our plan looks like and what we can offer to our staff. So with that said, what we're looking at for 2025 at this point is a 10% overall increase in employee premiums. And so we handle that with a cost share the city handles a portion of that and the employee handles a portion of that, but we are maintaining a $0 employee premium for 2025. And so employees would only have to pay additional if they cover other family members that are on their plan. Historically, we've been able to maintain a pretty healthy health fund balance to account for claims. However, the way that 2023 and 2024 are tracking with claims where they're at, we're pacing ahead of recent years with utilization and cost of our plan. So we're lucky that we can utilize reinsurance, and that limits our exposure with claims on our plan. But we may need to come back and talk with you in the fall about requesting some other appropriations to help cover the cost of some of our higher dollar claims. So more to come on that. And then with plan design, because we're a partially self-funded plan, we can look at the design of our plan and what the offerings are to find other measures for cost savings. So what we're looking at for 2025 is increasing both the in-network deductible and out-of-pocket maximum by $500, and then for out-of-network as well on the deductible and out-of-pocket maximum by $1,000. The majority of our plan users do focus on in-network care, which is a cost savings to both them as the employee and the user of the health insurance and to the city. Out-of-network care tends to be more expensive, so we don't see a lot of utilization there on our plan, but we encourage smart use of our benefits and to be good consumers of the health plan as a cost-saving measure for our staff.
What are the increases from? I mean, increased by 500 or increased by 1,000? Where are they now?
I don't remember all
So
of
for
those.
individual,
go ahead.
it's the individual and family
it's
deductibles is
the-
what he's asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so individual on the HSA plan is, and forgive me since I don't have the numbers right in front of me, is 2,500, and then on the family plan, I believe it's 5,000 right now, so those will go up by 500 and 1,000.
So remember, there's a difference between the deductible and the out-of-pocket maximums. So the reason we made this change is that those who we're seeing higher utilization across a broad number of employees. We want those who are using the plan to continue to need to contribute to the cost of their health care, because it's happening in a couple different ways. If you are an employee only, we cover your premium 100% for you. It's a competitive issue about why we do it that way. Our direct competitors for a lot of our positions also provide 100% employee-only premium coverage. Then secondly is that because of our claims experience, even though we're staying at the 83% employer cost share and 17% to employees, for those who have more than themselves on the health plan, that actual employee contribution is higher than some of our direct competitors for employment. And it's just because the cost of insuring our group is higher than it is in some of our direct competitors right now due to utilization.
Yeah, that was a question I had, is how does this 0% employee compare across the sector, and what is the total cost of this 0% out of the budget?
So in terms of our competitors, the 0% is something that is very competitive because we're seeing the other local municipalities do the same thing and covering that employee-only cost. And then on the employee-only portion of the plan, it's just under $1,000 per employee per month.
The thing I wanted to ask was if there was an opportunity to raise HSA contributions in addition to raising the in-network deductible and out-of-pocket maximum, because on a personal level, I would care more about not injuring myself, but having more contribute to my HSA.
I understand that,
Yeah.
most definitely. And we're always looking at plan design, and that's something that we have discussed. And so as we monitor the health of the plan, we can make some decisions like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to what we're looking at in terms of merit and compensation for 2025. So merit pay is just one tool when it comes to total compensation, and excluding recent years when inflation's been higher and we've utilized a cost of living adjustment and merit pay of up to 7%, our historical merit has really always been at an up to 4% rate. So for this year, as the market stabilizes a little bit, we're bringing our recommendation of moving our merit pay to up to 5% to remain competitive for 2025. Along with that, we look at our compensation plan year over year to see where we stack up. So in that small snapshot on the screen, you can see that in a pay plan, there's a minimum and a maximum, and every employee in the range is going to fall somewhere in between. And so this year, what we're looking at is making a pay plan adjustment of somewhere between 2% to 4%. So those numbers would adjust. And just for a snapshot there, I've put the 2% in there. This is still underway, very heavily underway. So we are still looking at a couple of options and what that may look like. And then lastly, from a wellness perspective, we do offer our employees a wellness bonus to make sure that they are visiting and having what we call a preventative care visit with their primary care physician every year. And so we award employees who are doing that to try to maintain good health and make sure they're not looking at things that could have been prevented and taken care of sooner by offering a $250 bonus for that this year. And we have one more slide, taking a little bit of a turn away from compensation and health insurance. And we're going to talk just a little bit about housing. Now, the things that you see there on the screen are all still in the works and under consideration. So these options are because we're continually monitoring the housing market in our area. And so the first item is expansion of our down payment assistance program to see how we can help some more of our staff enter homeownership, which is a very exciting life event. Additionally, we're exploring a housing stipend option for staff with some specific criteria that's under review. And then lastly, looking at an increase per FTE to the 505 Housing Fund to see if we can acquire more units for employee housing, as well as boosting the fund for the long-term maintenance of our units as well. So these recommendations are still in the works, and we will return with some more information in the proposed budget presentation.
Courtney, the expansion down payment assistance program, is that a grant or a loan? And
It's a loan program.
okay.
I just would want to check in, so this idea of down payment assistance is something we've had. To be more specific with the council, we're evaluating whether to consider that being in the free market arena as well. The program's currently only limited to APSHA and City of Aspen units for ownership. And so we're trying to bridge a gap here between success in lotteries with APSHA or city housing. City employer-sponsored housing compared to those who may have the ability to purchase free market within a certain geographical range of the city going forward. So that's why we're taking it a bit slow. We're learning from some others, other employers who offer a benefit like this and understanding how it plays in being a secondary mortgage, most likely on a property if someone has sought out the use of this benefit. And then just on the housing stipend for some employees based on objective criteria, this has been an ongoing ask of employees for several years to evaluate what it would mean to have a housing stipend. And so if there's any initial philosophical objections to that, it would be great to know, but we're still continuing that work about if it will happen in a recommendation to you. And what would be the criteria for eligibility, or just not things we're quite ready for today.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what sector these would be and what the priorities are.
In summary, we're looking at AMI. Where's pay versus AMI?
And not tying it to an employee's function?
Probably not, because that job exists because we need the job.
All right, and then one final topic.
Just
Sorry.
a minute. Tori's getting ready to speak.
Okay, sorry.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I don't have any input for you right now. I have questions around, I definitely am just interested in more information. I have a lot of questions around how the equitability, cost, or finance outlay and recovery for the city. I mean, there's just so many different programs when it comes to, not the stipend program, but more the down payment assistance and things like that. There's just so many different ways to kind of structure it. So I would just have more questions on that. As far as a housing stipend and stuff, you know, again, I really look to you and your team's advisement and strategy on things like that. So I don't have a philosophical position to come from, but I'd love more information. Any other input on those items?
Those items or the budget itself?
Just those items, just those housing items that may come forward? Okay.
So I don't know if council members Rose had some feedback on the budget process or on those assumptions that we just touched on.
I just wrote down three things. One of them was an email today from a similar person that you probably have heard from about the golf course, and I would just still love to hear about the funding of the golf course more, in the sense that it's an enterprise fund, but the person would love to see it more community-oriented as far as pricing goes. So just more information on that and seeing if there's any wiggle room there.
Okay.
Knowing, building in that food tax refund increase based off CPI is something I just hammer home. And then the last one, when we talk about budget, I just think it'd be really nice to have a recap of tangible wins. So at the end of the year, to be like, these are the projects completed this year that the community can celebrate, a long list of them, whether it be the Merle bike path or pickleball courts or whatnot. But I think everything that we do in a fiscal year and where we put our money should be put into a list and made known very clearly about where everyone's tax dollars are going and why it should be celebrated and why we're good stewards of our money.
Very good. That last point is a great segue into kind of the last topic that we wanted to get some council feedback on, quite honestly. In the memo, we kind of touched on the aspect that the calendar for the council is a bit condensed versus years past. And we have 4 meetings scheduled in October to kind of basically go through the budget process. That, to me, looks like we might need to do some prioritization of the budget review process, and I wanted to make sure that that was something the council supported. So in the memo, it talks a little bit about the fact that we would propose doing a high-level overview with Matt and myself, kind of hitting on day one with a lot of the high points about the budget, really talking about the revenue assumptions, kind of the expenditure overview, and then a little bit more depth on key capital components, and talking about debt. From there, though, we would then kind of put a little bit of an emphasis on looking at funds that have large commitments planned for 2025, and maybe those that also have maybe financial, not instability, but maybe a little bit less reserves kind of on hand. So those are the ones that might be needing more attention. In addition to that, we would anticipate bringing departments forward, every department forward that has a new supplemental ask, basically saying they need to come to the table and defend why those resources are needed, since they're basically an add-on to the base. And they would do that along with any major capital projects that we would bring those same departments to the table and have them kind of walk you through how those prioritizations were done and what the cost estimates look like and things like that. And then that would kind of give us the opportunity to maybe take a few of the departments that have more of a status quo plan for 2025 or no major initiatives to be touched on at a high level by Matt, myself, maybe Sarah, and wanted to make sure that the council was understanding of that and that was a reasonable path forward for the budget process. With that, obviously, there's Compass in those programs. We would probably lighten up a little bit of the Compass presentation, but to your point, Councilmember Rose, maybe we need to keep some of the information in there about some of the wins and successes.
Just as a comparison, last year we had 6 workshop sessions. So going down to 4, they would either be.
It's not a matter of the number of meetings, it's how you want to spend
Yeah.
your time and what you want to talk about. Right? My concern is if I bring forward 25 department directors to you, you're not going to have the meaningful conversations you need to have with each other about priorities. I'd like to remove the things that are status quo and give them to you as something to review in writing and follow up with specific questions you might have in them, but really reserve your work session time to focus on some of the big things, such as the asset management plan, that I think need a lot of attention from the council.
Yeah, I like that. I'm status quo, we don't need a 2-hour presentation. And really particularly interested in capital projects. And, you know, we're looking at some capital projects that might be expenditures in 2025, but they go out many years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say I'm supportive of less and attaining more. I think as a general statement, coming to budget season with some clarifying questions on some asset management or other departments and trying to get some clear direction from us, I think would be the most productive use of our time and yours.
I would agree.
We've talked about it. Yes, I'm in the same boat.
Great, that's helpful. Any other questions for us?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Alyssa. Yeah, verbosity.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Austin Weiss. I'm your Parks and Recreation Director, and tonight we're here to talk with you about an update to our recreation business plan that we've been undertaking over the last several, well, almost a year now. Obviously, coming out of COVID, the pandemic, the rec department took a big hit as we had to close doors and then subsequently alter programming and really had a dramatic effect on our revenues. And with the stated goal of trying to have a 50% recovery rate for the department, we've been working hard to try to get back to that point here. And so we had originally planned on doing an update to our business plan in 2025, and 2 years ago, we decided let's accelerate that process and get that started right away. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Desiree Whitehead, our Recreation Manager, and to her left, we have Annie Poole, our Parks and Rec Business Analyst.
Hello, thank you guys so much for having us this afternoon. I'm Desiree Whitehead, as Austin said. We're also being joined by Karen Dillon, who is one of our advisory board members, and so we're thankful for her and several staff members that are here to join us today. So as Austin stated, we encompassed our old business plan was supposed to be expiring or need an update in 2025, and due to COVID, we were allocated funding to redo it for 23 into 24. So we're excited to share the information that we have here with you today. We went into contract with Pros Consulting over the last year to develop this 5-year business plan. They worked with TCI to create a survey that went out to all of our patrons, and so it was a 27-question survey that was done by phone, the web, and mail, so many of you may have received it. We targeted Aspen residents that were within the school district boundaries. This was conducted last summer and into the fall. We were looking for 300 surveys, and we were able to get 318. So all of that information was taken and consolidated into a report that was presented to us. And so one of the questions that was presented to the community was overall value that the recreation department holds, and the current satisfaction and very satisfied was 58%, with 30% in the neutral. So for this, it kind of started some questions in our brains of why was there just this big gap of neutrals. So we kind of took some more deep dives into what that was. And so we looked at some of the barriers that potentially are available. And so as you see, 27% of people felt that there were no barriers. But the top 3 we see, or people are too busy, they don't utilize our facility, they use other facilities, or they feel that our fees are too high. So from there, we took that as a way to start to look at all of our programs, and Pros Consulting took all of our programs and facility services and did an analysis of them into what we'll see. So another question that was answered was, or asked was the benefits of the facilities and programs and services for the community and how the community members felt. And as you can see, most of them feel that recreation makes Aspen a desirable place to live. It improves the physical health and mental health of their families and accessibility for all people. So overall, the consumers were excited for recreation and felt that we were doing a great job with some areas that we needed to evaluate. Some of the priorities, so they took all of our programs and analyzed them, and these were the needs of the community. The 4 priorities that the community wanted to see were adult fitness and wellness programs, community events, adult biking, and water fitness lap/slap lanes. So these were kind of where community felt that we were maybe missing the mark. The ones in the blue, which are the medium priority, is they would like to see some expansion. And the low priority is not necessarily that we need to get rid of them, it's that they feel that we're doing consistent work in there. So this is just another way to kind of look at that data. This is broken down into household data. So you can see the top 4 priorities, which were the top of and then it's broken down into demographics. So households with young children ages 0 to 9, their top priorities are the adult fitness and wellness programs and events, but also the after-school programs, swim lessons, camps, all of those things that pertain to theirs. Teens, households with teens, again, the top 3, and then, tennis lessons, senior programming, and tweens. And so just kind of going across, we were able to take this information just so that we understand demographically where maybe there's a need that we're missing and or looking to get. So they took all of this information and put it into some recommendation for us. So these are the top 4, again, the adult fitness and wellness programs. So this is more focused on the reasoning they felt that this was a high one was because the adequate facilities that we have right now are inadequate facilities. So additional fitness spaces, so not necessarily the programming that we're offering, but the spaces and places that we provide. Community events, they're asking us to expand. Adult biking, we don't currently have anything. So ways that we can potentially partner with community entities to create some of that program. And then again, expanding on our water fitness classes. These will then take the medium, and so as you can see, senior programming, we don't have much of. So their recommendations are to partner with Pickens County, pickleball and leagues. We currently have very little, but we are expanding a beautiful outdoor facility as we speak. So those will be in the works. And then again, consider expansion for a lot of these or continue what we're doing. And then again, on the lower end, these are things that we're doing that we need to continue. And potentially there's a couple on there that we just need to evaluate to see if there is a need. All right, questions?
Well, something that struck me was that adult biking was low priority, but our children biking was low priority, but adult programs were higher. And trying to put that into context for need for the Merle Bike Park. And I don't expect an answer, it's just.
No, you should not
But I
expect
do
an
want to,
answer.
I want to clarify is that we provide instruction right now that for youth. That's part of the reason why it's listed as low, because we're already doing it. We're not doing the adult. Or if we do, it's very little.
We
Yeah.
don't do any adults
Yeah,
at all. So
and so there's not a great place for us to offer those lessons. So when we're doing youth mountain biking, gosh, where are they even going now? There's very few places. I'm just remembering back to when my son was in it. There's very few places they
we
go in
normally
town.
take them up Hunter Creek, and then we also take them. It's also kind of part of our bike and climb class too. So they ride their bikes down to Gold Butte and back, and then we've done some skills trainings within the Red Brick Lawn. So we've tried some different things. But adults, as to Sarah's point, we have not done a lot of adult programming, so it's an opportunity for us to potentially partner with somebody within the community that potentially does that. There's clearly some point of a need that people are interested in.
I mean, I would be interested in the Aspen Cycling Club and, you know, if there's a desire by the city to get into that service providing, yeah, I'd be most interested in how it interfaces with a private operator, organization, et cetera. City could definitely maybe do some support for it, but I have some other comments. Sam, I think, might have some.
Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to say you guys do a great job. Like, so this is like, I'm glad you're doing this, but you were talking about being perfect versus being incredible already. With that, though, some things that I'd love to see, I guess these ones are personal. It's hard to speak for other people here. I do listen to others when it comes to this, but tennis and pickleball leagues would be really fun. I think it'd be really nice to sign up for those, especially those individual sports. Sometimes it could be really hard to join a team, but to be able to just individually show up to something like that is amazing. I remember when I did first move here, it was really hard to join team leagues. I know sometimes you guys can do placement, but if that can be improved, I just remember that not always being the greatest communication to be placed on a rec league team, but I can't speak highly enough of the rec leagues here being the best. And then the last one, that's like a big capital project. I am a huge advocate for an indoor tennis court or indoor pickleball courts. I think that would be amazing to have that diversity in the wintertime to be able to play tennis and pickleball inside. And I know that near the public golf course might be the best location for that, but just an advocate for that, I think that would be amazing. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
I agree with the last statement that he said. We had conversations years ago about doing indoor tennis that did not make it past kind of some council comments. And I think that it still should be revisited, but Ward or John, do you want to chime in on potential for future indoor pickleball or tennis?
Well, I think we looked at the cost of trying to enclose or put a dome over the new pickleball courts that are up at the rec center or the Moore property.
Well, we are going to be doing a kind of a campus master planning effort for the golf tennis facility. And that's where staff has identified as the best location probably for an indoor tennis and pickleball facility. We've spoken at length with our current contractor, Petra, about that. That's in her desire as well. And so like I said, we're going to be undertaking that effort over the next year, and that'll be part of that conversation about, okay, what's this going to look like and how would it best suit that facility.
And the courts out at Island are under covenants with the 5 trees. When do those sunset or not?
It's not with 5 trees. It's the Maroon Creek Caucus and the Maroon Creek Club as well, I believe. But I don't know the sunset date on those. But there are the existing land use approvals for that area don't allow for that type of facility.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the desire for it is and what the cost would be to fulfill that desire.
Yeah.
And it would be helpful for us to bring that in context of all of the recreation facilities and their maintenance needs over new construction. So just bring that up, that is a constant balancing act for this team right here, because there's some major capital needs in your existing facilities we would prioritize before a new one from a staff lens.
Well, if you're looking at it, that's great. We'll get more information about it. Thanks. My comments here, could you go back another slide? And another slide. My comment here is that these charts are great, but they're kind of basic. There's not a lot of detail here. I can't really, so there's definitely some information and some connective tissue that I cannot get from this. I hope that you guys all have a little bit finer information to back up some of the recommendations that you'll bring to us. Because there's just some information that's just not available through these representations. So
So these are based on community needs. So these are what the community sees as priorities in their eyes. So we're taking these information, and staff have already started to, like with the community events and the fitness and wellness, we've already started to kind of brainstorm on what can we do and what can we add. And so this summer, if you've seen our outdoor series that we've been doing, so we've been trying to add different programs, different exercise classes at different areas, parks, locations, partnerships. So we're trying, so these are recommendations from they're priorities from the community that we're trying to take in, and we'll create a programming matrix that we have.
yeah, and I get that part about it. I guess what I'll do is I'll take two examples right here. So the adult fitness and wellness programs. Community need is basically saying that the people that answered this survey are saying that they feel like there is a community need for adult fitness and wellness programs. But are they saying that they think that it's appropriate that the city of Aspen provides these? Or are they just saying that they personally don't have the experience to access these kind of programs? I don't know that from this. Same thing with adult biking, for example. Adult biking, what it takes in our community is a bike and an adult, and you can adult bike. So are they saying that they don't feel that there's opportunities for them to bike, or are they saying there's not enough instructional help? And once again, is that something that the city should be providing, or are there other private providers that are already out there, but the people that are answering this survey are saying, no, I want it from the city and I want it more. So there's just that kind of information that I don't know from this. Of course, that's stuff that you guys delve deeper into. So all I'm saying is, as recommendations come forward to us, I'd love some of that other information, because these are very stark yes and no's, and yet it's from a survey. So I don't know where those come together. And just as we go forward, just that connective tissue and information is so helpful.
Yep, definitely understand that.
Yeah, you know, you got the Roaring Fork Mountain Bike Association, you have the
Sundog
cycling.
Athletics.
What?
Sundog Athletics.
You have that, you have the Aspen Cycling Race Series, both mountain and road. So I wonder how informed these people are of what activities are out there that are not provided by the city.
That's part of what I don't know. Anyway, and I could go down the list kind of, because it's all the same, like community events. What community events? Recreation events? So is answering that question about community events, is that targeted at like the Golden Leaf? Is that targeted at the Ride the Pass? Is that target? You know, I just don't know.
Fully understand. And I think a lot of these are targeted towards the City of Aspen Recreation Department in its entirety of what it offers and does for the community.
Which would then lead to the next question about what should we be doing and where should our energy be going versus what is provided by the private sector, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate
Fully
it.
understand.
Thank you. Did you have a comment there, John?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, wow, the diversity of the programming is pretty impressive. And I'm really glad that we are going to be riding the wave of pickleball popularity. Thanks.
No comment.
So the next piece of this is all of our programs were placed and services were placed into, they did a cost recovery, a cost of services, and gave us some recommendations. So implementation of classification services and cost recovery goals, developing a new pricing policy with the classification programs and services in part with a dynamic pricing strategy. So Our classification of services that we used were these 5. So each program and service were put into, if it's an individual benefit, considerable individual benefit, balanced community individual, considerable community, or community benefit. And then from there, they were then classified into essential programs, most essential, important, value-added, and then and mostly value-added. And then onto your right-hand side, you'll see that that's where the cost recovery is for the minimum cost recovery is for that program. So what this does is it helps us to make sure that these programs are meeting the community benefit, but also hitting a cost recovery.
I have a question.
Yep.
More for the council, I think. A few years ago, we said as a 50% cost recovery. Is that something that we still feel is right? Or do we feel that we want to subsidize? Do we want a higher cost recovery, or do we want to subsidize more?
Let's hold that philosophical question for just a little bit longer.
I have some slides for that, so don't you
all
worry.
of this is somewhat leading up to that overarching question.
So a lot of this data is from 2022 because this project started in 23. So these were our expenditures were taken and put into direct expenditures, facility expenditures, and to admin and overhead expenditures. From here, they were then distributed into services, so programs and facility rentals, daily admission, punch passes, and memberships, and you can see where the revenue is based off of those expenditures. From there, for 2022's data was put into this cost recovery that we hit a 39% cost recovery. In 2019, before COVID, we were sitting at a 49% cost recovery. I left out COVID years because they were very, very minimal. Then, so in 22, you see we hit 39, 23, we hit 43, and we are budgeted for 43%, but we're hitting more towards the 44, 45% at this rate for 24. So then through the business plan, their recommendations are to do cost of service, to put all of the programs and services, line them with the classification of services, and then a fee increase. And to get to this 46% cost recovery that they are recommending at this point, as a starting point, that will be a 6% increase. So that would be, these are just a kind of a glimpse of what a 6% would look like for 25. And then as we talk about cost recovery, this would be 25's cost recovery for 6%. However, we understand that 50%, as Ward stated, has been always the philosophy for recreation. And so to get back to that, we have kind of some recommendations. If we wanted to get to a 50% cost recovery in 2025, we would do a 15% increase, and then we would just do inflation from there on out. So as you can see, these are just a couple glimpses of prices of what could potentially could potentially cost. Yeah.
I was going to say, would you just flip back to your previous slide? Council members, just take a look.
I have one more, if you don't mind me sharing it with you.
And the
So
next one.
if we approach this in more of a conservative method to get to 50%, this would be a 6% in 25, and then a 5 to 6% for the next 5 years. So kind of being able to be a little bit more transparent to the community and showing these increases.
Sam?
So that's the one. I really appreciate the more gradual approach than the abrupt one, especially since people come and go, and this is the more equitable solution, in my opinion.
Can you go back 2 slides? And the second slide? And the third slide? I guess my immediate reaction is somewhere between slides 1 and 3 here, a 3-year approach to 50% is just kind of where I'm at. This goes back to what Ward was just saying. I would like to us, 50% is cool. I think that's a great goal for now. In the future, I could see it potentially moving up more, meaning less subsidy, more cost recovery. However, that's in different areas because the impacts of cost increases on different programs is just different, right? So team sports, and percentage increase there that is shared by many versus individual, so just different. But for me, I would almost suggest a 3-year approach in order to get us to that 50%. I agree that I don't need it as such a steep incline as 2025, 15%, but maybe a 5-year approach is a little slower than I would maybe suggest. So I think I'll put that out on the table as a possible approach is 3-year instead. Other comments?
Could I see the 3-year approach as
There
well?
isn't one.
Oh, sorry,
You've got the first,
previous, yeah.
yeah, it feels good. So this is just what we're on schedule for with the 6% increase, but then going to inflationary past that. It does not, that first slide that says 46%, this does not say we get to 50% anywhere down there.
No.
And it wouldn't even necessarily stay at 46, it could go less. So, but that's just for next year. And then the next slide is the straight increase to 15% to get us there by 2025. And then the last slide is the 5-year approach. So you're looking at a 6% increase a year. And I'm just saying that maybe a little more aggressive than that, but not as steep as that 2025 cost recovery of 50%. Yes?
I just want to give you some additional perspective. I'm not advocating for any direction, but it is important to remember that the recreation program is funded out of the general fund. It is therefore competing with about 17 other departments for those resources, including things like the streets department or the police department to fund those programs. So in terms of discussion about the subsidy level and how soon to get to a certain number, it's just important for the council to know that there are trade-offs you're making beyond just a decision about what is the cost of admission into the facility.
I would like to get to 50% before 2029. So I think I would also favor the 3-year plan.
Ward, any thoughts or input?
Yeah, my thought is a question of, is 50% the right recovery rate? Because that was quite a few years ago, the council decided 50%, trying to pursue that, and I just wonder what the rest of council feel if that's too aggressive. How much public support or how much tax dollar support do we put towards these recreational programs? I think the shorter, if we want to go to 50%, the shorter is better, I think. We stretch it out over a number of years, and then inflation comes in and you're getting a less and less to the delivery costs, I think. So I'm just curious how the rest of council feels about that 50%.
So I think it's a very delicate balance. I think I am supportive of that level in our community because I think that it is a very high priority for our residents and visitors. But at the same time, and I think that it's important to maintain access for as many community members as possible. So by keeping prices as reasonable as we can, but not all community members are the same, and their ability to participate is not, equal. Others have more means. So we have a really robust scholarship program, if you will. We have the opportunity for those that are in need to get financial assistance. Is 50% right? I mean, I asked Sarah just today about that, about what other communities are doing, and about where this sits. It's a bigger conversation with information from Pete and how it impacts the general fund budget. But at this time, I'm comfortable using 50% as our target. When we get there, I think a future council will visit this again. But for me, I am comfortable with 50% as a target.
So we're below that now, and if we have a 50%, it makes delivery of those activities more expensive. A lower recovery rate would make it less expensive to the community.
Understood.
To answer your question, Ward, yeah, since we're not starting from scratch, I'm not trying to fix what I don't consider to be broken. I'm happy with 50%. I think it's a good use of taxpayer dollars and putting money where our values are in a good spot. So I'm happy with that, and I'm not beholden to 5-year approach. I would do 5 years, but if 3 years is the will of the council, that's also fine to get back to 50% for me.
Thanks. John, do you want to just share with Ward any thoughts about that 50% target, Mark?
Yeah, I agree. It's something that, something we might look at in the future or a future council, but for now, I'm happy just trying to get us to 50%.
Ward, would you share how you feel about it?
Well, that's why I asked the question, because I want to know if we want to make it less expensive for people to participate in all these different programs, and increasing it to 50% makes it more expensive.
But they've categorized it so that that cost recovery is different across different programs.
Yeah, I understand that. I'll go with the flow here, 50%.
Okay.
And council, I do want to let you know that while it varies for community to community, this is 50% is a common cost recovery benchmark in communities. It has a lot to do when you look at what is the economic situation of the population that you serve, about whether you raise that number higher or lower. And so you might be in a very low income area looking at just a 10 or 15% cost recovery model. Versus one with a pretty consistent socioeconomic class that might be at 60%. So I just want you to feel good about your decision, to know that like you have both extremes right now that you're trying to balance access for the community in, and I think this is a very doable target for staff.
Yeah, what's the cost of a season pass versus an annual pass for adult? Is like a third of the cost of a ski pass, or a quarter?
Yes, an annual adult pass currently is $651.
And anybody off the top of their head know what the ski pass is?
$2,000 almost. I
Locals pass was just under $2,000.
Yeah.
So this is a third the cost, and it's an annual activity.
That's the ARC pass, 650 annual,
671, yes.
671. I mean, if you break that down, it's an unbelievable deal, honestly.
Yeah, it's a good value, and
$50 a month.
We'd love to give everything away if we could, but we cannot. Yeah.
Great. So next we move into, if you guys are all okay with that. Thanks for that feedback. It's great. We're moving into a proposed fee ordinance. So when you get our fee ordinance, it's like 5 pages long and it's every single program. So we've worked to create some condensed fee ordinance tiered services. And also the most important piece is adding in the classification and the cost recovery so that when we're able to have new programs and do different things. So these are our resident rates. So these again are just with the 6% increase. They'll be different when we come back to you at budget time. So these are our resident rates, our primary resident rate, and then our guest rates. These are, then we get into adult memberships, monthly through annual with our 20 punch passes, our family memberships, monthly through 20 punch passes, again, just kind of putting those, our senior passes, and then our youth passes. So really just wanting to be transparent with those and what we charge for those. We also have corporate passes, so these, we do a nonprofit rate for 100 punches, and we do a for-profit rate for 100 punches, and then 500 punches is what we do for big organizations. This is where we get into some tiers. So we took youth aquatics, instead of you guys doing each class and everything, we took to group lessons and then private lessons, and then our day camps, adding in our after-school program fees, and then our day camp fees. So doing some tiered with that cost recovery and classification. Same thing when we go into ICE programming, group lessons, private lessons, and then multi-session passes, which are for, these are for the youth, so these are drop-in hockey, different things like that. And then our specialty programs, we have our per day fee, so this would be like outdoor climbing, and then our per week fee, which would be our Bob Johnson camp that's happening currently, or chess camps. So these would be a per fee. These are our specialty camps that we either contract out with or do. This is not our in-house day camp program. And then the biggest change would be with our sports, doing a drop-in fee, an under 6 fee, so tier 2, a tier 3 in-house league, and then our tier 4, which is our traveling leagues, because they cost a little bit more, so being able to kind of put those in different tiers. And then again with, with sports, we have sports, but then we have programming. So if we wanted to have a dance class or karate or adult CPR, whatever those may look like, putting them into these tiers just to give us some flexibility. And then again with adult sports, drop-in personal instruction, and then our team sports, which we do 2 different models. We do individuals registration, and then we do a full team registration.
And Desiree, if I may just add a little clarity here. As Desiree mentioned, in years past, the fee ordinance had every single program, line by line by line. And what this will do for us is give us the ability and flexibility to actually adjust and add programs throughout the year versus once every year when we sit down with City Council. So this does add a lot of flexibility for the team to create new programs where we see the community need. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to see you guys be able to handle this dynamically instead of really have to come to council for all these line items.
Do you guys do comparatives? And you know, first of all, I'd say that I agree with what's been said. You do a great job. Rec department for the city of Aspen does a fantastic job. Do you, when you're going through this and kind of investigating, do you get information from other places and stuff?
Yeah, so part of our program, each program has a program workbook that staff work on, and they have to have at least 3 comparative agencies or organizations that we do so that we kind of know where we sit with that pricing.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And the last slide for the proposed pricing is the retails. So these are services like our ice skate sharpening, towel rentals, all the way down to merchandise like swimsuits, goggles, locker rentals, ball machine rentals, and then our birthday party bounce houses. And then one more slide, our facility rental fees that we have for each of our facilities broken down, per day, per hour, and we have a nonprofit and a for-profit rate on all of these. And then that concludes the financial piece. Some other recommendations that came from the business plan were operationals. So creating a marketing plan to effectively and efficiently be making sure we are utilizing programs and services and who our market is, and are we targeting that market the right way. Recreation program services evaluations. So looking at all of our programs, evaluating them, making sure that we know what their cost recoveries are, when it's time to sunset, is it time to expand, outreach to underserved populations, so ensuring that we are looking at all populations, a succession plan, and then our volunteer management, because we do use a lot of volunteers in our youth sports programs, and how we can better manage that. And that is all I have for you.
I have a question.
Yes.
How many years have you been with the city of Aspen?
17.
Just want to let you know I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Over the last couple of years, I've had to be in touch with you, talk to you. You're so great about sharing information, getting back to me about whatever questions I have. You have a complete grasp of every issue that I always bring to you, and I just appreciate you. Very well done on your presentation this night, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, I'd get beat up by my hockey guys if I didn't ask. Is there any plans to upgrade the ice garden or put in?
That will be in our next presentation to you in a couple of months for our master plan.
Sweet. They'll be very excited, especially if there's a bathroom in all the locker rooms. You know.
Hey, can't ask for everything here, Sam. Come on now. Any other comments or questions from council members tonight?
No. Well done, thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
So from here, Desiree and her team will put this into a final package, and you'll see the changes based upon cost recovery goals that you discussed tonight and what comes forward in October. Could you remind me, are there any other advisory boards that you still need to go to on this project, or is this the final stop?
This will be the final stop.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So it will become how we operate the rec department starting in 2025.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Tony, if you have any questions, please send me an email and I'll get them answered for you. All right. What time did we notice for?
6 o'clock.
You're so efficient.
Oh, really?
You could take a break and go have dinner now.
To answer Sam's question, unfortunately, you cannot start early.
So, guys, it's all good. We have 30 minutes before we will convene our special meeting for the purposes of an executive session. So, for now, thank you to GrassRoots. We appreciate you always. We do have an executive session scheduled for after our work session, but that's at 6, so we'll take a quick break while we prepare for 6 o'clock. And then we do have a regularly scheduled meeting tomorrow at 5. So please, if there's any members of the public that wish to make citizen comments, petitions, 5 p.m. here at City Hall. We'll see you then. Thank you, GrassRoots.